coming through loud and clear, and you guys can all see my screen. Sounds great. So we'll jump right in here. All right, so what is conditional formatting, right? At the heart of it, we have to know what we're working on before we can know how to use it. Conditional formatting is additional formatting that is applied based on the output data of a given cell. So based on the content of that cell when it is executed, when we do query that data source and grab those values. So what can we do with this, right? How can we use conditional formatting? Couple different ways. We can highlight elements in a given data set, maybe identify some outliers there. I'm going to show you today how to actually change the output based on the export type. So change what you see on your report based on the type of export there. So PDF, HTML, etc. And I'm also going to touch on how to conditionally format our charts. So this is something new to Exago, so I wanted to make a point to highlight it today. But in one of the reports that I have designed up for you guys, we are conditionally formatting that chart, and I'll walk you through exactly how you might do that yourself as well. And then how do we do all of this, right? So we can do it a couple different ways in that cell level conditional formatting. So we can use the actual field name. We can use a CellValue function that I'll touch on. Within that charting wizard, we're going to be actually using parameters based on be it the value or the name of those aspects of the chart. And of course, we'll get into that. And then we can also combine our conditional formatting capabilities with some custom functions. And I'm going to show you that. That's going to be our export type example. So as long as nobody has any questions right off the bat, I'll go ahead and dive right into the fun stuff. We're going to jump over to Exago, and I'm going to go ahead and get started by running this report here. Great. So this is going to be an example of what you can do with conditional formatting. I have a few different things happening here. They are all centered around our employee sales and some quotas that I have implemented as if these are my employees. Of course, this might be different based on your use case, but I'm going to go ahead and talk you through what we're looking at here. So these detail rows right off the bat are going to be conditionally formatted to display red if the sale is less than $100. So you can say Stephen Buchanan is doing pretty well here for January. He's got $95 on one sale, but other than that, he's above our $100 red line, right? Shows up yellow if he's between 100 and 200. So that's doing okay, but we'd like to see a little bit more there. And then it's going to show up green. You know, we really expect our employees to make sales that are over $200. That's kind of our expectation there. So that's what we're looking at in terms of those detail rows. And then in terms of his actual monthly total down here, so this is going to be placed in a group footer, right? And again, I've applied very similar conditional formatting here. Shows up red if that total is less than $10,000, and green here if that total is over $10,000. So if I go ahead to the next page of my report, you'll see that Buchanan for February did not make that $10,000 quota, right? He's slacking a little bit. So here we see this number display in red here. If we go ahead through Buchanan's year, we'll go ahead to December, right? Met that quota in December. That's great. But then we're going to get some overall totals. So similar here, I have conditionally formatted this cell, and this is going to be in our employee footer here to be red if his sales are less than $100,000. Yellow if they're between 100,000 and 150,000, and then green if they're greater than 150,000 there. So this is all very similar formatting, but it does give you an idea of how it can be applied to different cells there in different sections of our report, right? So they are going to be understanding of what section they're in and apply accordingly. If I go ahead and jump to the last page of this report, this is that conditional chart formatting I was talking about. So same parameters here that we were looking at in that Buchanan total. His overall total was 75,000, shows up red. If it is between 100,000 and 150, again, Laura Callahan ended at 133, shows up yellow here. And then Nancy DeVolio, as always, killing it, 202, makes our quota, and her bar is going to show up green here. So this is great, but of course, only an example of what we're doing, right? I'd like to actually dive into how we're doing this. So as long as there's no questions right off the bat, and I know Nick is monitoring that, of course, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this report to show you how we might apply this. So this is a very simple report, right? We've just got our employee full name here and then their total sales. And this is in a footer on employee name. So this is the equivalent of this overall total here in that bigger report. So what we'll do here is click on the cell that we wish to conditionally format, right? I'd like these numbers to show up differently. I'm going to go into my Format Cells menu and go over to Conditional. Now here's what I want to really walk through, right? Because this is where you're actually applying that conditional formatting. This is where you're affecting it, and this is the important part, right? We don't do this correctly, it doesn't show up the way we want. So first and foremost, we click Add, and then we're going to choose an action. So the action is going to represent the style that you wish to apply if our condition is met. So you're going to have the options you see here. We can affect the foreground color, which is what you've seen us doing thus far. Background color, font family, you can change the size, bold, italic, etc. Some of these are going to have an associated attribute. So for example, foreground color, background color, they're going to have a color associated, right? What we're changing there is the color. But if I go ahead and select maybe bold, there is no attribute because the action itself implies that attribute there where there's nothing to affect other than this action. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and select foreground color here and I'll pick red, right? I'd like to see, I'd like this to show up red if my employee sales are less than, we said $100,000 there. So now I'm going to have two options here. I go into my formula editor, and there's going to be two ways I can do this. I can input the actual value here that I'd like to evaluate. So that's going to look like an ag sum of that total revenue. And maybe we said 100,000. So if it's less than $100,000. Just as a note here, don't put any commas, anything in that number there. It will not evaluate correctly. So for example, if I had inputted 100,000 as such, it would not evaluate correctly. It wouldn't know what I was looking to do. Just a note there to make sure that you guys are all aware of how exactly these have to be formatted. Great. So another note here, this must evaluate to true or false, right? If this is true, our condition will be applied. So in this case, if the sum of our revenue is less than $100,000, as we have here, our condition will be applied. That foreground color will be changed to red. The other way that I can do this here is rather than putting in my actual field, I can use this CellValue function, and we've built this right into the formula editor here. So this will essentially do exactly the same thing, but the way I'm reading this is if the value in my cell is less than $100,000, apply this formatting. So they accomplish the same thing, but rather than force you to really know exactly what field is in there or force your end users, maybe you forgot to aggregate, etc., just use this CellValue. It's much simpler. If I press OK there, press OK here again, and then I run this report, we're going to see that anything under $100,000 is going to show up red here. So again, Stephen Buchanan, we know, is really slacking this year. Ann Dodsworth as well, and Michael Suyama are having a little bit of trouble, but everybody else is doing great. As another note, if we do have multiple, so I'll go ahead back into that conditional formatting menu. If we do have multiple here and they overlap. So say we had one that said less than $100,000, but then we had another one that said, well, show up green if it's between 50,000 and 150,000. Those are overlapping, right? Exago is going to adopt a cascading style here, and we're going to take the lowest one applied. So it will evaluate these in order and apply them whatever matches, but again, in order. And that's just a note, if you're playing around with this and it's not coming out the way you think it should, that might be something that you're running into there. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to pause for a moment, make sure there's no questions coming in on how exactly we applied that conditional formatting there. Couple other notes. Our formulas there are going to have to contain a logical operator, right? They have to evaluate to true or false, so you must be evaluating something against something else. And additionally, this is an if statement by nature, so we don't want it to come off as you don't need to be writing an if statement in that formula editor. That's how it's going to be read by Exago anyways. If this is true, do this action with this attribute applied. Wonderful. All good there on everything? All right, sounds great. Getting the thumbs up over here, so we're all good to go. All right, so I'd like to also show you how we can conditionally format our charts, right? So this is, as I mentioned, something that can come in very handy if you'd like your charts to really match what you've applied to your report, to the detail information. So I have this chart here. This is that first report that we looked at here that I initially showed you guys on, and I applied that same formatting there. But what we're going to focus on here is this chart down here. So I'll go ahead into my charting wizard. We're going to want to be on the Appearance tab, and you'll see this new button that says Conditional Colors. If I click this, I'm brought into Conditional Chart Formatting, very similar to our Conditional Formatting cell menu. The difference being here, I have control over the colors, right? That's all we're going to be able to affect because it is a chart. So in effect, what we're trying to do here is simply format the color of these based on those data values. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a color first and foremost. I'll choose red here, yellow, green, etc. You guys saw that these are the three that were applied. Then if I go into my formula editor, I'm going to show you what differs here from in our regular conditional format cells menu. I'm going to have options here based on what is on my chart. So conditional chart parameters is going to give you your options. Rather than be able to use CellValue or be able to use those actual fields, right? We're gonna limit you. We're gonna say, okay, well, you can evaluate based on your data label or based on your data value. So I can format something to be a certain color simply because of the label, simply because it is this type, this is what it's mapping. But in this case, that's not what I want to do, right? I want it to be based on that output value. So I've selected my data value parameter here, and it populates. I can show you exactly how this works. If I select data value, it's going to populate right there. It'll actually give me an idea of what that value is exactly right here. So I'll know if that's what I am looking to affect there. And then again, logical operator, those can also be found in this menu here, excuse me, here. And then 100,000 again. Great. So we'll press OK, and that is applied here, and we can read this formula right back for ourselves. In this case, the only thing that's differing here is that I've wrapped everything in an AND statement. And for more information on, I know formulas are something that can get a little bit tricky, right, if you're not really used to them. We have dedicated all of next month's support labs to formulas on the end user side, and then also custom functions and how you can work those, how you can create those and apply them. So certainly keep tuning in for more information there. We are planning ahead and certainly leading in with these. Great, so that's going to be how we apply that there, right? And then if we finish, we saw that when we ran this report on the last page, that chart is formatting correctly according to those numbers that we put in. So again, any questions here? That's kind of a high level overview, right? But it's not that difficult to apply these conditional formatting chart colors. We really make it as simple as possible and give you a little bit more fine-grained control here. So all set there? I think we're looking good in terms of questions. Okay. So the last thing I'd like to show you here is going to be a little bit different than this, but still using that conditional formatting, right? So I'll go ahead and clean up these. Just clean up my bar for everybody. There we go. All right, so if we look at this, this report number 3, we can also use conditional suppression, right? So that's one of our actions, one of our possible actions there, to view a different output of our report, so to alter that output based on our export type. So if I go ahead and export this report to HTML, so I'll run that to HTML, all I'm going to get here is this chart. But this is simply a duplicate of this report, of this conditional formatting report that we just looked at. This is just a duplicate with some conditional switches there. So what I've done here, and I'll drill into the editor so that we can take a look, I've included this right here, and I'll go into the formula editor so you can see this. This is simply get export type. It's a custom function that I've written, and like I said, we're going to dig into that quite a bit more next month, so we'll give you an idea of how exactly we would do this. But using that function, what I've applied here to each cell that is not my chart, right? So each of these rows, I'll go ahead into here. My action is suppress row. Again, with this particular action, there is no attribute to be applied. The action, it is the attribute in itself. And then my function here is suppress this row if get export type. So if my export type equals HTML. So this is the same conditional formatting that's applied to all of these rows, as I said, everything but my chart. And in effect, what it does is when I export to HTML, all I see is that chart. Now, the use case here, and the reason that we dreamed this up to begin with, is that maybe I'd like to put on my dashboard this chart from this report, but I don't want to see all of this detail information. You guys saw this report when I ran it here was a couple hundred pages, right? I just want the chart. So what I can do then is place this report on my dashboard, and when my dashboard loads up for me, all it displays is this chart. And I've, of course, created this dashboard as it applies to Exago. This would be however you're using dashboards in your environment, of course. But I just wanted to illustrate that what we can do here is cause just this chart to show up by placing this report on my dashboard. Additionally, if I export this report to PDF, right, maybe I'm going to go print it and bring it to my manager, I don't want to see the chart. I don't need to see the visualization. He just wants to look at all of the detail rows. So what I've done here, and I'll go back to my editor, is conditionally suppressed this row containing my chart if the export type is PDF, Excel, or CSV. So, and I've used a simple or statement here. Again, we'll have much more detailed information on writing these formulas next month. We understand that they can be a little complex, but that one was a fairly simple one. But now when we export this to PDF, as I did here, if I go down to the last page in this report, we'll see that my chart is not here. I only have that detail information. So what I've been able to do, just to reiterate, is take this report with all of my information, all of my detail information, and a chart reflecting and pulling from this info. I'm able to create a dashboard and only show that chart because my export type here is HTML. And then I'm able to export it to any other export type and only see my detail information. I don't want to see that chart here. I just want to see that detail information. Now, just to reiterate, these are the use cases that we've come up with. You guys can change these however you'd like, right? This doesn't have to be exactly how you use this suppression or this function get export type, etc. But this is one example of how you might. So again, I'm going to go ahead and pause for questions. That is the end of the Exago lab today. Fairly quick one for you guys. We just wanted to give you kind of an overview of the different things you can do with conditional formatting there. Okay, so we've had a request to see this get export type code. Of course, we can show you guys that. Give me 1 second to pull up my admin console and just give you an idea of what that looks like back there, right? So here we go. This is a very simple one, and here we are. So this is how we're going to create a custom function, right, in Exago. We've named it get export type, and this is really just for the purpose of how it appears on that end user side. Again, give it a description. Since I was using this internally, I didn't need to describe it for myself, but that's certainly something you guys can do there. Couple of parameters here, and then this is all it takes to return that export type there. I'm writing this in C#, and I'm just digging into the session info on the report level and grabbing that export type there. As I said, this is a very simple one, and Nick actually, I believe, will be leading the lab on custom functions next month. So he'll be here to give you guys a little bit more information on how you're gonna work these. But here's a little sneak peek. I'm going to go ahead and check that questions box to see if there's anything else we should be answering on air. So give me 1 moment there. All right, it looks like Nick has those handled pretty well. We will follow up afterwards with any questions that are outside the scope of this lab, but it does seem that most of them are pretty respective to those cases individually. So I am gonna let him handle that there. I'm gonna come back here, and final remarks, tune in next month for that information that you are all asking for regarding those custom functions. We certainly do intend to give you some more insight there, just not the focus of today's lab, of course, and also information on writing those formulas. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're certainly going to continue to answer those questions and get those responses out to you guys. But we really appreciate the interactivity. It's nice to know that y'all are interested. And as I said, happy reporting. I'm so happy to be back doing one of these with you guys. I really am. So have a wonderful day.